Google AMP. Hopefully I'll find you in the right room. All right, I am Joshua. I work at Meredith Corporation. You might know us from Better Homes and Gardens and a bunch of other magazines. I focus in on the parents world. So I get to work on parents.com, which is really fun. Some of the other ones are working on like shape.com, and that just makes me feel very inadequate as I look at those sites. So I like to work on parents. I feel like I have hope for the parenting side of things. Parents is the 70th largest Drupal site in the world, so that's kind of a fun motivational thing for us as we're trying to pick things. And between our three main brands, Parents, Parenting, and Fit Pregnancy, we get about 70 million page views a month. So consequently, speed's a really big deal to us, and really trying to optimize front-end technologies really pushes that needle. There we go. Okay, so Google AMP, just to get a sense of where we're starting from. People familiar with it? People, this is a brand new term? Somewhere in between? Maybe heard it thrown out there, but not. Okay, cool. So the problem that Google AMP is trying to solve is that mobile pages are too slow. When you are loading up a page on your phone, it takes too long, and that hurts us as websites, but this also hurts Google because, of course, Google's behind most of the advertising that's on a lot of these sites, especially the slow sites. And the sites that are driven by advertisements often are the slowest. So Google is both motivated from an altruistic sense of improving the web, and they're also motivated very personally to make this faster, because if people aren't sticking around to load the pages, they don't get to see the Google ads, and Google doesn't get their revenue. This was just published last month from a group at Google. They did a machine learning model and mapped out why people were bouncing and when they were bouncing. And so it's a little bit of a confusing chart, but 6.9 seconds, you have significantly higher on the bounce session side, and when people aren't bouncing, you're seeing lower page speeds correlated there. So
those are people that didn't give up.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So that's like your max time, 4.5 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Well, so this is the average. So they took all the pages and they took which people bounced, which people didn't, and then took the page load times and averaged them. And just to say that yes, this is a strong contributing factor for whether people are going to bounce or not. Because that's a hard metric to get, because you don't get bounced if they didn't stick around long enough to get Google Analytics firing. We've got. I'm going to stand over here so I can see the glare. So Google for a long time has published all these different best practices and said, you should be doing these things, and here's our page speed insights to tell you, what you're doing wrong. And finally, they just got fed up and said, no more Mr. Nice Guy, we are going to dictate for you. These are the standards you will follow to the letter. And as a result, our stick is you have to follow this. Our carrot is if you do follow this, you will get higher ranking, or you will get better promotion, or you'll get the subconscious effect of people clicking on it and not knowing why, but little lightning bolts there. So that was really motivating, and the cool thing is, for those of us inside of big business or any sort of decision-making capacity, it's really hard to say to the business side why they can't throw one more third party on the page, why they can't include this one other little embed that seems really nifty. And Google is forcing that best practice. They're kind of forcing the business's hand to say, if it isn't a Google approved plugin, you can't include it on your page. The downside of this, again, from the technologist standpoint, is we're sort of taking several steps backwards here. We've made these giant leaps in the dark ages of your m.dot domains, where you had a mobile-specific site, and up to responsive, and being able to just be maintaining this single presence. And now we have this separate experience, these kind of almost open standard, but ultimately proprietary pages that are dedicated just for Google and Google AMP. So on the one hand, as a user and as a person who doesn't like clutter on my pages, I'm really excited for this. On the other hand, as a engineer standpoint, I'm kind of depressed that I'm going to have to maintain something separate. But Google tells me to do it, so I will. This presentation was going to be kind of boring. Still might be, but it's going to be less boring now because up until this point, Google launched and said we're launching Google AMP for everyone in April, and contacted a lot of publishers, pushed this hard. We got contacted and we're like, go, 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 let's get this out here for April, let's push it. And then the launch date came, and what happened was they only did it for news articles. Basically, if it wasn't a 24-hour piece of content, it didn't surface. And so for the last several months, the answer for if you should do Google AMP has been not really, unless you're the Washington Post. But on Tuesday, conveniently for this presentation, Google just posted a blog post saying, here's a demo, and if you guys have phones on you, pull it up here. This is going to be our first demo, so it's going to be using it on your phone, g.co/amp demo. And this is a demo from Google demonstrating what things are going to look like here shortly on mobile search results. If you want to see something from parents, you can search our highly ranked term of gassy baby. You might learn something too. Got it there for you. Got it there. So there's two different ways that AMP search results are being and are going to be displayed. The first way is just with this icon, which is what I've got a screenshot of here. You're going to start seeing this appearing in search results, this little lightning bolt in AMP. The second way is what's already out there, and is the carousel. And if you search for Turkey, as in the country, not the food, there's enough news articles and fresh content about Turkey that you're going to see the carousel across the top. And you'll notice it still has that AMP icon on there. And so content is going to start surfacing depending on how much is there that's AMP. It's going to turn on or off the carousel. If you've got enough content to justify the carousel at the top, it'll be there. If you only have a few scattered listings for AMP, that support AMP, it's going to be this more icon-based just within the main search rankings. Is everyone seeing it on their phone? Okay. They don't have a timeline announced. It's the next couple months for now. What are you going to say? Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, so we know a little bit about AMP, where it came from, why Google's pushing it. Let's dive a little bit into the technology side of things and what it takes to have an AMP page, what's different about it. The first thing we've got is how do you even know that an AMP page exists? So an AMP page is at this separate URL, and how you define it is you put a link tag in at the top of your page, and it says link, rel, and HTML, and then it points to the AMP version of your page. Some people are doing amp.domain. The Drupal control module does a URL query command at the end, !amp. And when they hit that page, that's where this new AMP document lives. Harking back to Todd's presentation, same content, but your presentation is completely different. So when I think about a web page, I've got 4 different pieces that come to my mind. So the first is just your basic HTML. That's all over the page. You've got your CSS for your styling. You've got your JavaScript. And then you've got your third parties and your embeds on the page. So Google's kind of taking these one at a time. So the HTML side of things, they've replaced and removed a lot of different tags. So you no longer have, thank goodness, an applet tag. You no longer have an iframe tag. You no longer have a script tag. You do have an image tag, but it's amp-image now, and it's amp-video. And that's allowing their pre-processing to go through and optimize it for mobile and speed it up. So you've got a completely different HTML spec based on the same concepts, but it's very separate from anything we've done before. Remember that for when we get to the Drupal contrib modules approach to AMP. CSS, we're kind of stepping away from everything that we've been doing in the past. In the past, it's been aggregating it into bundles and putting it in the single massive bundle, getting it out of your HTML from back in the day when there were inline styles and styles defined in the head. Google's taking more of the critical CSS concept and saying, you get to dump your CSS at the top of the page. You have to dump it at the top of the page because you can't link to a style sheet. And you only get to dump 50 kilobytes worth. So when we were implementing this for parents, it was really important that our designers worked really closely with our front-end devs because you have very limited space for the styles you're going to get to use. And still keeping that brand consistency without running over the 50 kilobytes is a little tricky. One little caveat of that is fonts. You're allowed to load fonts separately. That's kind of one of the few exclusions. You can't base64 encode your fonts or anything like that, but you are allowed to load fonts from approved providers. There's some bans on which selectors that aren't performant. JavaScript is completely prohibited. You do not get to do any custom JavaScript. The only JS you can put on there is structured data. You can do LB-JSON. Otherwise, no JavaScript whatsoever. And the final thing is the third parties and embeds, and this sort of shows Google's philosophy to this whole thing. They need to be signed off by Google. You need a Google engineer looking at these. So we want this Vine HTML component. They had to provide a pull request to AMP HTML's GitHub repo. Google looked at it, said, nope, these things aren't performant. They had to revamp it, work back and forth until finally Google gave them the golden blessing, and now there's a Vine component. And that's the whole model behind this, is that Google's saying, you guys don't care enough about performance, and so we're going to care for it. Final point here of what makes this up is, so how do they actually tell if you're doing anything? Yeah.
So at this point, since they've added it to the repo, is that just for you, or is that going to be for them in the future?
Ask me another way.
The component that you had to go back and forth on?
Yep, so that's now part of the AMP HTML spec, and anyone can use it. Yeah, and it's maintained by both Google and Vine as things progress.
If you were to, so Vine is a big company, right?
Right.
Owned by Twitter. I mean, if you were to add your own components, could you get a pull request in there?
You could. Okay. You just have to care enough. Okay. So it's more of a level of effort than it is. I mean, and then it's a prioritization thing. Okay. So when we were doing this, no, Google was too freaking out about getting Vine and the other big players in there. Now, as things have stabilized more, and maybe more a year from now, you're going to have a better chance.
If you had some kind of proprietary.
Yeah, so we have our own ad network system that has been built in-house. And so one of the first things we talked about was, are we going to try to get Karma into AMP? Or are we going to fall back to some older ad technologies and just do what's already there? And we said we're going to fall back. But eventually, it'd be nice to get ours in there. How they enforce this, there's a validator, and if your page does not validate, Google's not going to serve it, so it won't show up in the result as AMP any longer. The other very fascinating part of this whole stack is Google is using their own CDN to serve your pages, because they trust their CDN more than they trust you. And so any of those pages that are being served off are coming from their CDN, not from yours. Does it work? Does it speed up your page? Yes, it does. Here's web page test, waterfall request diagram. On the left is our very sad normal mobile page for parents.com for an article. And the sad part is that this goes down through the floor and about halfway down to the next floor. That's 20% of it, all the different requests that are being made. We pay huge attention to our own code, so that isn't us. That's all the third parties that are on the page. Our actual page load is about 10%. And between 90 and 80% of the page is third parties and all the stuff they're loading. Here's our AMP page. And we've got 23 seconds before DOM complete, the page is ready to be interacted with, versus 8 seconds for the AMP page. So yeah, it works. Is this something from a business standpoint that you should be doing? There isn't a black or white here, so there's a few questions you want to be considering. The first one is, are your pages content-based? So if you have forms, if you're e-commerce, if you're a JavaScript app site, this is not for you yet. That study that I had the chart from before, basically that was a huge question around, should Google launch AMP for e-commerce? And the answer was yes, it should. So it's coming. But as things stand right now, this is targeted at publishers and at content producers. So if you've got a site for a university with departmental information, do it. If you've got a site that's your admissions form and surveys across campus, AMP isn't for that yet. Second question is, so if you are content-based, move on to how will this impact my ad and third-party revenue? And this is ultimately just a question of numbers. So on the one hand, you're sacrificing revenue because most likely all your third parties are not going to be on there yet. And for us, we couldn't use some of our more advanced ad direct sold campaigns and things like that really bring us revenue. We had to fall back to more kind of like backfill sort of stuff. So we're losing revenue on those pages compared to our $2 CPMs on our main pages. However, we're also getting higher traffic, and even more importantly, in our decision-making matrix here was we're getting more traffic on subsequent pages. So the big thing that we run into is our site's kind of a one-hit wonder. People hit that first page, they get the answer to my child is very gassy right now, what do I do? And then they hit back and go away. The goal that we have in mind with Google AMP is the page loaded so much faster that they're much more likely to click on that subsequent link. And so while we're sacrificing revenue on the first, ideally we're picking that revenue back up downstream from there. There's different models here. Our sister site, Better Homes and Garden PhD, they did kind of a loss leader model. So those first pages are AMP, but every subsequent page is their main site. And so the goal is to hook you onto their site and then build the revenue after that.
How would you do that?
When you link, we're linking to our amp.parents domain for all of our on-page links. They're linking to their www.
And even though I'm on my mobile,
Google only knows it from search results. Yeah. And then the third question, and this one's most important because we've got a big variety here, I'm sure, of different types of sites, is what's the implementation effort and what's my ongoing maintenance cost? Because, back to that con, we are now maintaining a fully separate page and kind of a fully separate site. That third question is kind of what we're going to get into a little bit more here. We've got three different options for implementation. We've got the very easiest, and there aren't many of them yet, but there are a few floating out there. We've got third-party services. So sites will scrape your site's content, and then they will host it for you in AMP-compatible format. If you've got a smaller site, that's a really easy way to get it out there. If you've got a large site or you've got complex content on the site, it's probably not going to cut it. But it's a great way to get your toes wet and just be like, oh, okay, well, let's do some analytics. Let's see how this is going. Maybe even just throw part of your site out there with some of these third-party services. The second way, and that's what we'll drill into just a little bit more here, is the Drupal contrib module. So Google contracted with Lullabot to produce the Drupal AMP module. And they did a good job of rolling that out. And so it's available for us to leverage. Third one is a custom implementation. Sometimes if you've got a really custom site, or if you've done something weird with Drupal, like we have, it just makes more sense to roll these pages yourself. In our case, the AMP module is still being worked on while we were needing to launch with this. And so we were kind of beta testing Lullabot's module, but it just wasn't ready yet for prime time, so we needed to roll our own solution. And that ended up being maybe less effort. I don't know. It was one of those, you didn't have another option then, so we just had to do it that way. let's talk a little bit more potentially about the Drupal contrib module here. Before we jump into that though, we only have a few people. Do folks want to talk about specific sites, talk about specifics here? Kind of, there's a lot of information around AMP, and I'm trying to distill it, but there might be things I over distilled.
Actually, we've got a couple questions.
Okay. Okay, so Facebook, so this is actually, thank you for asking this. Facebook Instant Articles, you kind of have a funny timeline here, and I had a slide I nixed, but it was basically saying this sort of thing. Facebook has the same problem, and maybe even more dramatically. They want sponsors to be posting their pages and paying to boost them and driving clicks to their site. So we post about gassy babies, we want to post it on our parents' magazine page, and we want people to click on it, but our site's too slow, so people never stick around to see it. Especially after Facebook's been so fast, they kind of have this expectation set. So Facebook announced Instant Articles, and they partnered with New York Times and Washington Post and several others to get it out there. So today, if you have the Facebook app on your phone, and you go to the New York Times page, you'll see, ironically, they used almost the exact same lightning bolt icon. You'll see instant article pages that pop up just like that, versus the ones that don't have it are churning to load. Which should you use? It depends on your site. If you have a Facebook audience, so if you're NBC maybe, and you've got a large audience following you on Facebook, Facebook Instant Articles is hands down the place to start. The revenue from it is way better. So we launched with Facebook Instant Articles. Our own site, we hit about $2 CPMs. On Facebook Instant Articles, they sell the ads for us. It's all through their audience network, and we're hitting over $350 for CPMs. So I mean, that's a no-brainer. We're wanting people to go to our site through Facebook now because we make more money. And the implementation is almost identical. So again, Facebook contracted with Lullabot, who built a shockingly similar model of contrib module to do Facebook Instant Articles, and it's a good contrib module as well. We again did this too soon, so we had to roll our own solution, but that just seems to be the way we end up doing things.
So would be the way to go do the poll?
Yeah, ideally. So it's just going to depend on, does the majority of your traffic come from SEO? Then Google AMP is your first priority. Does the majority of your traffic, or at least a significant portion of your traffic, come from Facebook Instant Articles? Then come from Facebook, then that's your first priority. And the third one in the room, the often forgotten Apple News. It's absolutely a thing, and we have that on a roadmap. I don't know much about it yet because we haven't delved into it. But you have three different implementation schemes going on here. So it's interesting because Google wants a separate page that has a one-to-one correspondence. Facebook Instant Articles wants a feed that you send it of all of your content, so they kind of build up this content library for themselves. And then Apple News wants, instead of an RSS feed, they're more progressive. They want a JSON feed, again, of all of your content. So yeah, we had that as a to-do, but haven't gotten into it yet. Do AMP pages prefetch? My understanding is when Google crawls it, it then stores it into CDN. So yes.
Actually, it's more client side. So
oh yes, also. So you'll notice with the carousel, I don't know if anybody searched Turkey, that carousel up at the top, when you click that first article, you can then scroll to the side and it actually loads that second article. So it's already prefetched that second one for you with the anticipation that you're going to do that. Yeah.
Is it phone specific? Like, no, I'm not phone, but I try using browser.
No, I'm running iOS Safari here. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions before we look a little bit at the contrib module?
Is there a linter debugger to clear that cache?
I would hope so by now. When we were doing it, there wasn't. And the whole CDN was really loosely defined. Yeah, Google wouldn't really talk much about it. I think they hadn't really figured it out themselves just yet.
Okay.
So the CDN is better defined now, but I don't actually know specifically. I think the last I heard was it does a really good job of respecting expiration headers.
So, but say you publish
right.
an article that immediately somebody looks at and says,
yeah.
Dude.
Right. Yeah.
I need to change this right now.
I know. I'm not sure, honestly. Okay. I do know they just published a new component that was a live update component. So again, they're still very fixated on this 24-hour news concept. But so for live events, they can be constantly pushing into just that thing, which almost makes me think they're not giving a good way to expire the page itself. But I obviously that was a good question. The other interesting thing is because this is being adopted as a standard, and we kind of have this VHS Betamax challenge going on here between Facebook Instant Articles and Google AMP, and they're both competing for other people to adopt them. Google, because Google's gained more success there, and so Pinterest has adopted it. Twitter has made movements towards adopting it. And other third parties are able to do the same thing. They're able to crawl your site, look for that link, and then send people to that domain. So because they're only doing 24-hour news, since April we've had one piece of content surface with the app, which hasn't been super useful from an analytics standpoint. But the traffic we are getting is all coming from Pinterest. Any of our pins are pointing to, when people are on mobile only, are pointing to the AMP version of the page. So that's giving us a little bit of ability to analyze things. Any thoughts? Oh. Okay, so here's our contrib module. Implementing this, following the instructions step by step is really important to do. We've got Composer here, which some folks may not have worked with if you haven't jumped into Drupal 8 stuff yet. So getting Composer in place first before you try and install the module. What Lullabot did is they took a custom module, which was great for setting, what URLs provide AMP content. But they needed to actually override every single part of the page because the head, everything else has to be different. You can't just have Drupal shoving its aggregate CSS in there or JavaScript. So they had to also partner that with a custom theme. So you've got the AMP module, you've got the AMP theme, and then they wanted, I'm sure this was a requirement coming from Google, they wanted to have a PHP library that could be used outside of just the Drupal sphere. And so they also have a Composer managed dependency of a PHP library to do transformations of content. So if it's given an image tag inside of your body field when it goes to it, that transformation library knows to convert that into an AMP compatible image tag instead. So these three pieces all interplay, so it's a little bit of a complex setup. They've done a good job simplifying it, but you need to have the module, you need to have your Composer manager for that PHP library, and you need to also have the theme. So here's my different modules. I've got Composer Manager, I've got AMP. They have some specific implementations of certain components, so AdSense, DoubleClick. And then when I'm going to my configuration, I can set it per content type. I can pick my theme, so you can extend their base AMP theme to fit with your own styles as a sub-theme. I can put in my Google Analytics information, my AdSense information, my DoubleClick. which it isn't far enough to know I don't have those modules enabled. And then an AMP pixel if you're using other analytics options. And then one of the nicest features is that PHP library ties in to validate your page on the fly, which is the most frustrating part of this whole process is, you've got a weird content field type, it's not going to validate. Trying to figure that out is just a pain, so thankfully the PHP library has started doing that for you. Yeah, we've got the metadata side of things, which just helps with a more kind of structured data side for AMP results. And like you'll notice on that carousel at the top, they'll have the logo for CNN and the organization name at the top. This is what specifies that side of things. So when I hit, because I'm full screen, you can't see the URL, but when I hit my normal node page and I put $AMP at the end of it, I get served the amplified version of this page. When we inspect it, we can see my normal featured image is instead being served up as an AMP image. It has a specific layout here, and then the JavaScript side of things is populating that with stuff the AMP library needs to render that image responsibly. Here's my normal body, and then this part is what I was just touching on that disappeared on me. But at the very bottom we have the pass-fail results. So AMP HTML, we've passed validation. So Google will be able to render this, they will be able to index it and crawl it, and they will include it in search results.
Does that just take care of all of your pages for you?
It does. So yeah, you turn it on for your various content types. It's not going to help you on sort of the different landing pages if those are more like aggregated or views based or panels or something like that. But for every single individual content type, this is going to do the trick. It's still very beta. Like if you've got field collections or paragraphs or things like that, you're going to run into problems with it. And they're still running this sort of 3 steps behind race of Google launched this thing in April too soon, is ultimately what it boils down to. So they're still madly adding components. They didn't have a hamburger nav when they launched. And that's pretty essential for most sites. So they've added a bunch of these components, but then to get them to trickle down to the PHP library and then into the Drupal module, you're kind of always running a few steps behind, which is why we haven't really made the switch yet for our site, because we can just implement ourselves a little earlier if we need to.
What is the implementation you guys are doing?
So we ended up landing on a pretty similar place, which is funny to see after the fact what they did. Let me get out of full screen here. So we ended up doing a very similar approach. We have our Meredith AMP module. So that's our custom module that defines when you hit with the specific subdomain, what page it's going to do. We've got different helper functions to set up our Google Analytics custom variables to define what the AMP version of the URL is, add the subdomain, check if the page is AMP for when we're linking to it, image styles, things like that. And then that works in cohesion with our Meredith AMP theme, which then what we had to do there, which is the same thing that Lullabot had to do, is we had to actually override every single TPL that was going to be hit to make sure it was actually compatible with the AMP standards. So our page starts off with very minimalist markup. Our HTML, same deal. One of my favorite little Easter eggs they require is you have to do the lightning symbol in your HTML tag to specify that this is an AMP page. It just says that it's AMP. It's like a Unicode. Yeah, you copy and paste it. They do have a little call out that they say You are allowed to type AMP if you're boring, but it's kind of fun to actually have Unicode in your markup. But yeah, we've got very, very specific, very simplistic inclusions of things. So
is that at the limit?
No. So we also have inside of AMP head, we have some Sass compiled CSS that we sort of build similar to our critical CSS that just has, what we need. Total. Yeah, it's kind of a fun challenge. You can have fun with it. Yeah, I didn't work on that part. That's a good question. We have that in a separate repo. I mean, it's not nothing. Like, you can get a fair amount into there. Yeah. You just can't do any sort of encoding or have any sort of like reset style sheets or stuff. At that point, you're just.
But you shouldn't need it, right?
Exactly.
You don't need to worry about layout a lot.
No, I mean, so it's very limited. I mean, you're dealing with a single column. You don't have a lot of components to move things around. I mean, you really are just dumping content out on a page.
So it's going to be typography and
you're just doing your very base brand guidelines, basically.
That's great. Do you have any validation or CI use that to make sure that say if another uses different components that it's still valid?
So there's a handful of different ways. We have our QA automation guy, and he worked really hard on trying to build something that did that. And it was really tough to tie into Google's validator in any meaningful way. So what we've ended up settling on, and this isn't ideal, but Google provides that as part of their console, Webmaster console tools. So they changed it. It's part of that. And
Search Console?
Thank you. Search Console, Webmaster Tools, rebranding. They have an AMP tab inside there that tells you of any pages that don't validate. So we just have an ongoing pay attention to those and either on the dev side mitigate it if it's a common problem across lots, or on the editorial side fix it. I mean, the nice thing is if it doesn't validate, it doesn't necessarily hurt you. They just don't surface it. So yeah, it's been more spot checking and just sort of responding as we go. And that is the really nice thing about Google AMP in general is you can launch it for part of your site. We only launched it for our story content type. We haven't done it for our slideshows. We haven't done it for some of the other content types we have. And we're giving it a try.
You went from arming the module to the templates. Is there a view mode in between?
So the Lullabot module does a view mode.
You didn't because you did the custom module?
Yeah.
So this would bypass anything else you have set up, like analyzer defaults,
right?
Page management panes.
Yeah, we have a very code-based site. Okay. Not much of Drupal's kind of more layout stuff is in use on parents. Let's see if I can.
And this is Drupal 7 high school.
Yeah.
How long have you guys had this implemented?
Since April.
Oh.
Yeah, we went out somewhere in the April 20s. I forget the exact date, but so once you have AMP set up and you've enabled it for the content type, and what you'll see here too, which is really slick, is you have the AMP specific formats available here. So this is an AMP image, and as a result, because it's an AMP image, I can now pick things that are specific to AMP. So my AMP image layout options are these ones. The downside is the 3 steps behind thing. Google comes out with a new display for images. It doesn't hit the Drupal module until whenever later that you wanted to patch and get it in there.
You haven't done personally?
Pardon?
You have not done personally? Okay. So there is.
Is there now?
Nice. That introduces AMP cursor to the width, the height, and AMP image source. Has basic controls, cursor.
Yeah, so there's awesome documentation out there. It's got a lot better compared to when we were trying this out. Their READMEs are actually the best place to start for documentation. inside the GitHub repo. And then they do have a lot of sort of extensions that are consistently being added. So inside of here, we have our extensions, and this includes both the things like Vine and Vimeo, as well as some of their own just different like basic components that you expect to have. So an ad placement or an accordion or different things like that. So that's how you get around not being able to use your own JavaScript, is you get to use Google's approved JavaScript for your accordion and your carousel and so forth.
Are you thinking of possibly switching over to using the Lullaby module in the future?
Not yet. Until AMP stabilizes, extending that module is a bit too much of a pain right now for us, whereas extending our own custom is pretty straightforward. Once both the AMP spec and the module catches up to that spec, stabilize it more, then I'd evaluate the effort to switch it over, which would make sense. I mean, the other thing is because of the way our site's set up, which is custom to us, so this isn't super relevant for anyone else, but we don't do the managed display side of things. So it isn't a model we're used to working within. We like to have very OCD control over exactly what comes out into our template.
What are the biggest challenges?
Moving target, AMP was changing daily. Like at the start of this, they hadn't decided how to point to the AMP page. So we're like, yeah, these pages are going to be floating out here. Nobody will know how to get them. And it was like, well, will we do a link tag? Will we just have a set URL? So that was frustrating. Post launch, just feeling a little bit misled that they didn't. That it was really for news organizations, and they didn't really happen to mention that. And then being an early adopter meant we were having to push hard on a lot of third parties that weren't ready and hadn't even heard of AMP, and we're saying you guys need to get yourselves included in there. We're in the process of changing from one video provider to another one, partly because the old one didn't have an AMP component and didn't plan to for their videos. And so the new one does have an AMP component, which is a selling point for us. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is...
That was not the only problem.
Yeah, there were others. But yeah, like Bright Cove is there, and Uyala has a PR going right now, so yeah. My hope for AMP is that eventually it won't be necessary anymore. That these best practices will be adopted. And I hope that this is kind of Google's long end game too, that they're forcing this so that eventually we can circle back around and just say, yeah, we should be doing this on our entire site as much as possible, following a lot of these best practices, forcing third parties to do best performance, all of that, so that 2-3 years from now, there is no such thing as AMP anymore. This is just how we do websites. That's my optimistic standpoint.
All those third-party libraries, they kind of like for their revenue, and so in theory, like when I'm looking at this, like you guys can just say, fine, we'll just try and use you.
Exactly.
And if you switch to something else where they're actually trying to make it more performant, then eventually, like you said, you're not going to need AMP anymore. You're just going to start using all these libraries, and all these other companies are just going to say either we're going to dump or we're screwed and we're done, because it's a big problem. Like, I tried solving this same type of problem when it came to responsive images when I was a student, and I created a dynamic asset there. I thought one of the qualifications to it was you needed a somewhat fast supercomputer just to do all the stuff on the fly for you, which
at the time,
I mean, that's like 30. You can go over $3,500 pretty fast. You know, I always reference back to like the Mac Pro. You know, I mean, you can get it, and it should be possible to work for it, but when it came down to it, the protocol needed to change because you're just not sending enough information with your class.
Yeah, And one of the other things that Google's pushing with this, just as a side note, is HTTPS being required for all components, which will be really nice as they are upgrading their systems to be more performant and to support HTTPS. That's ultimately benefiting us as the publishers because we'd like to switch to HTTPS, but our third parties don't support it yet. So, I mean, ultimately, this is very much a tangent. I hope that Google is saying we're going to flex our muscles and get everybody to be better in hopes that it improves things for us and everybody else long term. That's my big picture hope. Nothing to base that on. That's just in my mind.
It's to me, it's such a hard thing to shift back. So this is the first time in Google's history when they said yes, create duplicate content.
Right.
And not responsible.
Yeah.
Well, because they won't cut those, because they're forcing you to do it.
Yeah.
But in theory, like you should have a monopoly on it anyways. So
You do. Yeah.
Right.
That's one of the requirements.
On your HTML page, you have a canonical.
Yeah, Google requires that to validate it because of that issue.
Now that you have a link back to the actual content page, so that should I want the full experience?
No, but that wouldn't hurt. Yeah, you definitely could include that. One thing that we ran into was because our ramp video player wasn't supported, what do we do on our pages? Like that Gassy Baby page, it has a video front and center. Well, that can't play, but we still want people to do it. So we have to do an image with an overlay icon that they click on, and it takes them to a separate video page to play it.
I think that should be still.
Yeah.
We need to see the Gassy video.
Yeah, right? I know. I should have played it.
Yeah, so you put in links at the bottom that says take me to the desktop site, right?
Back to the old school way.
What was the? You obviously made a big investment into this company, and you haven't seen the.
None whatsoever. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it took effort, but it was about two sprints, so 4 weeks. So we kind of had to set aside what we were doing for a month and move on this. Most of the work was done in one of the sprints, some prep work in the other one.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's effort, but it's not massive. And
yeah, you're ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah, and had the contrib module been out there, I think the approach I would take now is drop the contrib module in for whatever content types it most easily works with. Try it out, and just bide your time. I mean, Google's still not showing any of its cards, so it's good to be prepared. It's good to be kind of there. I mean, most of our traffic comes from SEO, so we can't afford to risk losing that and losing our places.
You know, this would actually have a significant impact for 6 months site growth your organization because you're early on. You guys are taking care of that. Now other brands are catching up with our saying, go back.
Right.
We got to do this.
Yeah. And we're one of right. And we're one of the brands that's more SEO driven too. A lot of other ones have more social media based and newsletter and people on their desktop that have a bookmark. And we're very SEO based, so it was pretty critical for us. We just couldn't risk it.
You guys planning on submitting a case study to DW?
That'd be fun.
I said that to the guys who did the litter license. He said, who's going to
That's a lot of hours right there. There's questions in there.
Well, thanks.
Cool.